Hi class, today we are going to be starting a new writing unit. This writing unit is going to take us all the way up until our winter break. So we are going to be working on fictional narrative writing. So you might think back to the first week of school. We did write a specific type of narrative called a personal narrative. It was called a personal narrative because you had experienced something yourself, and so then it was personal and it was familiar to you, and you had a chance to write about that. So you were writing about your own experience, something that happened over the summer. Well, this week and up until Christmas, we are going to be writing a different type of narrative called a fictional narrative. And so I'm wanting to ask you, what are some things about a fictional narrative that might end up being different from a personal narrative? Okay, go ahead and answer that question now. Okay, as I saw some of your responses, I know some of you said that you know the word fiction means that it's not true or that it's made up. And there are different types of fictional narratives. One type is realistic fiction. So realistic fiction is one that might include mysteries. It could be survival stories. I know some of you really got into like the survival and Survivor series of books in the last couple of years. I remember somebody telling me about that. It might even include things like dramas. It could be humorous stories. Last year, I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you were supposed to have written a mystery story and a survival story at some point last year. Another type of narrative fiction is an adventure story. And so that's really similar to a survival story like you've done before, but the characters don't have to encounter dangerous situations and they don't have to fight to survive. So which one of the books that we've read so far included an adventure story? Yeah, good. Most of you came up with that one that we had about Matthew Henson, that Keep On book. So that was definitely an adventure about discovering the North Pole. But that one's also a biography about the life of Matthew Henson. So that one wasn't fictional. It was a real story, but it was an adventure story. It was based on true facts instead of being made up. Our other one, and some of you said this too, but Walk Two Moons, the one that we just finished not too long ago, could also be considered an adventure story. It just included a different type of adventure. It had an adventure with Sale and her grandparents taking a long road trip. They didn't really experience some of the same kinds of dangerous situations, and they didn't have to fight to survive, but they were still having an adventure along the way. So what makes Keep On an adventure story, or what makes Walk Two Moons an adventure story? Go ahead and add that in there now. Okay, for Walk Two Moons, one of the things that I saw was that, I'm sorry, not Walk Two Moons. If we're talking about that survivor story, talking about Matthew Henson, one of the things that made that an adventure story was he faced some pretty extreme obstacles or challenges. He had challenges with the weather. He had challenges with how far they had to go. He even had that one point where he broke through the ice. And somebody had to pull him back out, right? If they wanted to survive, they would have to beat the odds that were against him. With the Walk Two Moons, there were also some ideas shared. It was kind of like, I guess it was kind of like a quest. They took a long journey to search for Sale's mother, and there were some things, some events that came up along the way. One of the ones that stuck out to most people was Graham's getting bit by that snake when that boy was at that riverside and was trying to rob them. And there were a few other events like that in that book. Okay, so we can also think of both of those books as kind of like a quest. So it's like a long search for something. Matthew Henson and the explorers were searching for the North Pole, and then Sale and her grandparents took a long journey to look for Sale's mother. Now, obviously, we find that the grandparents knew where Sale's mother was, but Sale wasn't really sure at that point. So with this writing unit, we can be pretty excited because I think you're really going to enjoy being creative with your story ideas, and it can be pretty entertaining for us to read each other's stories, and I hope to give you an opportunity to do that, even though we won't be necessarily in the classroom together. We'll figure out a way to share those. So when authors write adventure stories, they have to decide on some details about the character and the plot before they even start writing. And we might want to create, have some kind of focus for our discussion. So we'll have to decide some things like, is our story only going to have one character? Is it going to have more than one character? Will the character be you? Maybe the main character is not you. Maybe it's somebody else. Will your adventure story be realistic, like the ones that we discussed from like Walk Two Moons, or realistic like in Matthew Henson? Clearly that was realistic because that one was not nonfiction. Or will it end up being a fantasy? So a fantasy is going to have like kind of crazy, zany characters. It might have settings and events that wouldn't actually happen in reality, so complete fantasy. Would your characters be on a quest in search of something or someone? I don't know, it could go any direction really. Sky's the limit when you're talking about this type of fiction. So go ahead and think about that now. Share a couple of ideas with me real quick. Okay. Thanks for sharing those ideas. It sounds like some of those are going to be some really great stories. Let's think about narrative structure now, the way that you would set that up. So if you look at my screen here, I just have a reminder of what narrative structure might look like. Sorry, got the wrong tab. Okay, so narrative structure, I'm going to have a few different things. First of all, I'm going to have a beginning. I'll have a middle. I'm going to have my ending, and then I'm going to have some extras in there. So if I take a look a little closer, in my beginning, I'm going to want to describe my characters, name who they are, or maybe introduce the narrator if there is one. I'm also going to have some organization in there, and I'm going to want to describe my setting fairly clearly. And in that first chunk there, my reader's going to have to be able to see what is it that the main characters are trying to solve, what problem is there, or what exactly is the adventure about. In my middle, I'm going to be sharing the events. There's going to be things that happen within the story that kind of help to move it along. So my events are going to need to be clear. They should go in a particular order, and they should help to solve whatever that problem is that the reader was, or that the character was having. So for instance, in our Walk Two Moons book, we know that Sales, you could say that her problem was that she was trying to reach her mom by her birthday. And then we could see that there were events that happened along the way until she finally got to the point where she was able to see her mom, even though her mom was in a cemetery. Throughout our events in the middle, we'll use dialogue, we'll use description, and we're going to show how characters respond to the events, and we're going to use some pacing to kind of slow the story down in spots or speed the story up. So if we would think back in our Walk Two Moons, there were several spots in that story where maybe the writing would go faster and it would seem like the story was going quicker, or sometimes it would take a little bit longer and it seemed like it was slowing down. So we're going to try that with ours. And then we'll make sure we have a logical solution to the problem at the end. So again, in Walk Two Moons, if you remember, Sale ended up finding her mom, got to see her in the cemetery, and we kind of had this wrap-up solution where they said what happened immediately after, like where life was at that point. And the other thing that we'll be looking at is our graphic organizer, which we will be starting today. On our graphic organizer, this looks a lot like other ones that we've seen. We start out with the topic here and put our name. We'll start with an introduction, so that character, setting, interesting detail, and we'll have a transition word into our first event, and so that's going to start kind of telling those events in your adventure story, and then we'll add a second event, and we can continue adding those events until our story is complete. Really, we're looking for at least 2 events in our story. These aren't going to be super long. They're meant to be fairly short, but then we're going to leave off with a conclusion. So we're going to have that lasting feeling for our reader. We'll go over some different ways of running that conclusion. All right, so again, you can plan for more than 2 events, but we are just going to plan for 2. Right here, I'm going to end this video. This was kind of an introduction. I am going to have you work on your own graphic organizer, and so you'll find that posted within this assignment. But I do want you to check out the second video because I'm going to be going through how to set up that graphic organizer, what that looks like, and I'll give you my own example for a way that you would be able to do that. And then your job today is going to just be to do that graphic organizer, except for the conclusion. Really, we're just going to be starting it, so make sure you watch that second video to know what to do with that, and that'll be what you'll turn in today. All right, we'll see you in that next video.